It's over. It's finally fucking over. The Chicago Bulls have dismissed Jim Boylen as the head coach of the franchise. No longer will this man be the leader of the locker room. No longer will this man be the one in charge of every decision made on the floor. Jim Boylen is no longer the cancer hovering over the head of this entire fucking franchise. Just so you know ahead of time, this video is going to be entirely unscripted. I didn't feel like my thoughts really need to be written down on paper, and they'd come out pretty well raw, as most of mine have been on 2K Talks anyways, and scripting it would make it feel cheap. Basically, my whole opinion has been very well known on this channel that I cannot stand that Jim Boylen is the head coach of the Bulls. Not only as a Bulls fan, but as someone that's not even just an NBA fan, but someone with basic common sense that, like, this guy is just basically incredibly bad at his job, and how does anyone not see that and immediately let him go? Luckily now, he is no longer in position to hurt us Bulls fans anymore. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's honestly how it was. Because for me, I was literally emotionally checked out of being a Bulls fan, and now I can at least somewhat be back into it. Now, I do want to quickly mention that I've seen a few handful of people mention that Jim Boylen, at the end of the day, is just a guy, and he's been getting too much shit as a person because of his job. And I do agree that we shouldn't act like Jim Boylen is just some massive bad person. Like, he was just bad at his job. But in terms of if I feel sorry for Jim Boylen for losing his job, well, I'll just show you. Here we go. Yeah, I'm getting real emotional right now. Yeah, as you can see, I am devastated for Jim Boylen and his future, as he is dismissed from his job as the coach of the Chicago Bulls. He's clearly having a rough time right now. He's making millions of dollars despite not having a job anymore, and he's made millions of dollars already for being possibly the worst at his job of any human being in the world relative to what their job is. So yeah, I just feel real bad for Jim Boylen and the future of him with the millions of dollars in his bank account with millions more to come. I just don't know how he's gonna do it. Like, where does he go from here? More like assistant coach job that will pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably not in the NBA but in college. It's going to be rough. It's really going to be rough for him. Like, I don't know how he's going to handle this. Yeah, don't know if you could tell if that was sarcasm by the water bottle in my eye, which may or may not have looked very fucking stupid. Either way, it's going in. I don't feel bad for Jim Boylen. Like, if you're that bad at your job, you deserve to be fired. That's the end of it. Like, I know people like to just be like, live and let live and shit, and I generally have that philosophy. But if you are that bad at your job, you deserve to lose your job, and I'm not going to feel sorry for you because you lost it, especially being that how many people get to be as bad at their job as Jim Boylen was bad at his job, and not only remain employed, but make millions of dollars in the process. Like, yeah, he was the worst contract for any head coach in the league, but like, boo fucking who? That's still millions of dollars. Like, I don't feel bad for you, Jim. Sorry about that. You don't get to be that bad at your job and then not be happy with getting fired. Like, you should have seen this coming. Like, if I worked at McDonald's and then took a shit in the cheeseburger and gave it to the customer and then I got fired, I don't get sympathy. Because Jim Boylen is the McDonald's employee shitting in a cheeseburger of head coaches in the NBA. So I wanted to quickly go over some of the greatest hits of Jim Boylen in the NBA and as a head coach. I'm not going to be putting in photos or anything. I'm just going to get this really as uncut as possible. Just cut out all the fucking silence and shit. I'm going to talk about what Jim Boylen has done in Chicago. So first of all, the number one most egregious thing that really should have had him fired on the spot, even though he should have been fired a long time before this, was when Daniel Gafford got hurt and he was sitting on the floor in pain, and the Bulls had possession of the ball, and Jim Boylen did not use his timeout. His multiple timeouts, in fact. And as a matter of fact, on top of that, Rick Carlisle, the head coach of the Mavericks, had to, I think it was either intentionally foul or use one of his timeouts to get Daniel Gafford off of the floor. The opposing team had to call a timeout in order to get the opposing player up from injury, while the head coach of the team, of that player, didn't want to do jack shit. And it's not like Jim Boylen is someone known for not wanting to use his timeouts, because he's known for quite the opposite. Matter of fact, there are a good handful of clips, specifically one with Mike Budenholzer, I believe it was him, where Jim Boylen and his team is down 25, and there's a minute left, and he calls a timeout. the fuck? Like, the man just didn't know the basic fundamentals of being a head coach, like things like rotations. He has probably the worst rotations of any coach I've seen in any position of power ever. Like, literally, he did some 2K shit where you put in the starters for 10 minutes and then you put in the bench for 5. But it wouldn't even be that, because there was genuinely a 13-minute stretch in a huge game for the Bulls where it was just the bench unit. And that's not a joke at all. Like, this guy was so commonly running out lineups of just the bench. Like, it'd be like Chris Dunn, Ryan Arcidiacono, Chandler Hutchinson, what's his fucking name? Thaddeus Young, and Daniel Gafford, or God forbid, fucking Luke Cornett, and we'll talk about that in a second. Like, can you construct a worse offensive lineup in the league than that? Because I don't think you can, at least with players that actually somewhat belong in the NBA. And that was this guy's rotations. That was the kind of lineups that he was rolling out consistently. Playing Chris Dunn at small forward. Not playing Denzel Valentine, despite the fact that he was a small forward, even when both of your small forwards were injured. Playing Luke fucking Cornett and Cristiano fucking Felicio over Daniel Gafford, who was very clearly, from the second he set foot on an NBA court, a billion miles better of a center than both of those guys combined. The system the guy ran on both ends of the court was not good. He had a defensive scheme that initially made the Bulls pretty good at defense, but it was gimmicky and teams figured it out pretty quick because it was an attempt to go for loose balls a lot and cause confusion, but it really just wasn't all that great after a couple of months. Now, injuries did not help that, but that alone proves just how much this scheme really relied on the fact that Wendell Carter and Chris Dunn were amazing defensive players. Like, remove them from the equation and this scheme is dog shit. Offensively, the Bulls have enough offensive weapons to not be towards the bottom of the league. Kobe White is a volume scorer. Zach LaVine is a pretty efficient volume scorer. Lauri Markkanen is a stretch big that can put the ball on his floor. Wendell Carter is a great, and I mean great, passing big man. But of course, Wendell doesn't get to pass. Lauri Markkanen is used as just a spot-up shooter, and there is zero off-ball movement to be had for Zach LaVine and Kobe White, and instead, the entire offensive system is one of them dribbling the ball and trying to create offense, while the other one stands there. And that was basically the entirety of the Bulls' offense for this entire fucking year. And that's why they were so bad, because they didn't have a coach who told them to do anything different, because Jim Boylen didn't have an offensive scheme. He wanted the Bulls to be towards the top of the league in assists, and yet they were towards the bottom. They were not a good passing team, and that wasn't what his personnel was, but he wanted to make them do that. When he first became the head coach of the Chicago Bulls, he took this young team with guys like Zach LaVine, who is a very fast dude, Wendell and Lauri Markkanen, who are both bigs that like to run the court, specifically Lauri running as the trail man, and he wanted to give the ball to Robin Lopez in the post. That's not a joke. That's something that he was doing. Like, a lot. Zach LaVine, 23 point per game score, good true shooting percentage. Get the ball the fuck out of his hands. Get that down to Robin Lopez, who plays like 10 minutes a game on the Bucks now. So that is just a handful of the bullshit things that happened with Jim Boylen. Another thing that's worth mentioning is he was egregious in interviews. Like, his reasoning for things was completely flawed. He also had this whole weird thing with his personality where he's supposed to be this tough, like, hardworking type of mentality guy, but then a player, like, committee comes up against him and he immediately bends the knee. Like, yeah, you're a real fucking tough guy there, dude. He was completely hypocritical with that. He flip-flopped between what kind of coaching style he wanted all the time. He was trying to make these guys work as hard as possible when they're players that should be preserving their bodies. Like, the idea of nonstop work is great, but it's really not actually healthy at all. But that's basically the entire list of bullshit that happened with Jim Boylen, though there is a long line of other shit that I didn't go over, but that's basically the greatest hits. Then I do want to say real quick, I'm not appreciating seeing people praise the Chicago Bulls for this decision, because they did less than the bare minimum. Like, they should have done the bare minimum 2 years ago. Firing him now is even less than the bare minimum. Like, praising the Chicago Bulls for firing Jim Boylen is like praising a first-year driver for not driving through a preschool and killing a dozen toddlers. Like, congratulations on not doing that. Like, good for you. That's not something to be praised for. I will praise the Bulls when they finally stop at a stoplight or make a right turn without the entire car fucking shaking. And I gotta say, as I mentioned earlier, I was pretty much checked out as a Bulls fan. I was ready to just not care anymore. Like, if they traded Zach LaVine, you wouldn't have seen some passionate video from me, because I was done. Don't care anymore. Trade him. fuck if I care. Trade him for a second round pick because I just don't care what happens with this franchise anymore. But in terms of the future of this team and in terms of my investment in the franchise, well, there is nowhere to go up from here because there is nothing more rock bottom than Jim Boylen being the coach of your team, because I had the mentality, and pretty much everyone did, because it's true. If Jim Boylen is the head coach of this team, no decision that this team makes matters anymore. Like, sign LeBron James, and if Jim Boylen is the head coach of your team, you're not getting anything notably better. Now that he's gone, that burden is lifted off of shoulders of Bulls fans, the Bulls franchise, the Bulls players. So many of these players have put out some passive-aggressive ass things after this trade, like Thomas Satoransky something like, "Oh, I don't have a coach anymore." Like, you know what you're doing with that. Lauri Markkanen posts a photo with the praying hands emoji. He was like, "Thank God that fucker's gone." I didn't even mention in his egregious shit, like misusing Lauri Markkanen entirely. But I'm going to be mentioning that in a 2K talk after this because normally those go up on Sundays, and today is obviously Sunday, so it's going up tomorrow. In terms of my predictions for the future, I'm hoping they hire Kenny Atkinson or Dave Yeager. I've suggested that they trade for Chris Paul. I'd still like to see that, but also if they get a top 2 pick, then obviously don't do that. Either take Anthony Edwards or LaMelo Ball, either one of those two. And then after that, just like, it can only go up from here, and there are still some exciting young players on this team, and I would like to see what those young players can do with a competent NBA coach. I think Kenny or Yeager would be great because they both brought in a culture and both made some young, not really all that hyped up teams with low expectations and made them pretty good. Kings barely missed the playoffs, the Nets made the playoffs, and that was with not that talented of rosters, just with some young guys who had some upside and needed some leadership. So hopefully it's one of those guys, and hopefully this team can make some more steps towards the future. I'm confident in Karnisovas. I'm not mad at him for how long it took to fire Jim Boylen. I really think that was pressure from ownership, which that's just kind of how it be sometimes. But I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna wake up from this and it didn't actually happen. I'm gonna still be in Atlanta, sleeping on the fucking couch, and it was all some bullshit I made up in my head, and I'm not back home and recording this video right now. Hopefully he's gone because I was on the verge of ending it all. Not really. That was fucking dark. That was a little extreme. But yeah, that's the end of this video. I was on Peer-to-Peer recently. Don't know if you checked that out. That was cool. Meeting those guys was cool. Check that out. Also, podcast. There's going to be a bunch of new in-person podcasts coming out, including one with Legend of Winning, me with a bunch of friends that I had in Atlanta, me and Mojo by ourselves, me, Mojo, and his girlfriend, which is an interesting one. So that's 4 podcasts in person, as well as one with King of the Fourth Quarter that should be coming out in the next couple of days that we recorded before the trip. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. But that's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music. Thank God that fucker's gone.